Okay. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode. An interesting title has found me. And so the question comes, what could a power beyond stories be like? And does language live in the inner realms? And what does that mean? It's 2020 and we're the endurance of some intelligence, and it's as if every child born, they are having a sort of forgetfulness of their collective being. It's kind of interesting. It's as if the human position isn't an individual position. When we look at the idea of the human being, it is in some sense in three modes I perceive it. One mode is man and emptiness. It's the emptiness of the world. The other view is just the person alone. So there's a view that there's nothing. Then there's a view that it's just you. And then there's a view that there is you and more. And it's in that mode, it is to those who are in that mode that I'm kind of speaking. That you have observed life to a certain degree and now are wondering what is the evolution of the self with its relationship in the world. When you look at evolution, I explained that there is, during evolution there was a pen that fell down from the hand of... I say that before I can really dive into the title, I want to attempt to explain, at least in my view, how are we creatures that suddenly we have stories. And so I'm going to share a totally different angle on even evolution. So here, entertain this idea as what you're hearing from Mr. Within. So I see four phases to evolution. And these four phases, I see them as a ring, and I constantly see them repeat. And I have seen this as a game of dimensions as well. I think for this episode, whoever's listening, I would advise you get a piece of pen and paper, because there's a lot of things I'm going to be trying to explain, geometrical shapes maybe. Anyways, somebody, imagine you were like a busy kind of a merchant, and in the middle of your break, an alien came and talked to you. And the alien said, quickly tell me the dimensions of this world. And then you as a merchant, you see there's customers at your store. So you got to go back, but the alien is waiting for a response, imagine. In that situation, this is what I have kind of felt of a simple explanation of all phenomenology that is accessible by consciousness. Or that is viewable. I feel these are the dimensions we find ourselves in this world. Now, there's many people in history, many schools of thought, many ways. I'm just sharing one view, so bear with me, folks. I feel that there were, let me first begin like this. There were four phases of evolution. There was just the world. There was nothing. There was no people, no beliefs of people, no responsibility, no opportunity to live and experience the free will. It was just world moving. And so I consider this to be the unconscious. And then after this unconscious world, there came a self. There was suddenly the design, the whatever, whether it was seeded into this planet or whether it was it's a higher dimensional technology, whatever it is. After some point, there came, this is what I call the significance of the objective evolution. For me, this is the actual objective evolution. Even though evolution, the idea of it is gradual development over a vast period of time. It's more like adaptation, taking into consideration adaptation. But what I'm saying is that there came the emergence of limbs. There came legs that were no longer, we weren't just a part of the earth, we became separate. Excuse me. So we've become separate. So first it was just unconscious world, then there came an unconscious self. So there came a body, but this body wasn't aware it's a self. It was just a separate part of the earth, but as much as it's concerned, it's just movement. Just a creature endlessly moving, no articulation, no consciousness. Kind of like insect level. Just designed to be a part of its environment, strangely. Then we had something they don't teach in schools, and I don't know why. I don't know why it isn't even a question. I was shocked at the fact that it took me a while to even pay attention to this. I call this the subjective evolution. And the subjective evolution is when we experience a conscious self. We experience a conscious self. What does that mean? That means at first it was just world. Then there came a part of this world separating from itself. Then this part of anyways, so unconscious world, then there came an objective evolution. There was just an object. I mean, literally put your palms on the ground and tell me you're not an animal. Literally we're like an animal that stood up too early. So so there was the objective evolution, then the subjective evolution, and the subjective evolution, it's kind of that moment where the creature realized either it saw its shadow or it saw a reflection of itself or something communicated to it. It became conscious that it's conscious. And I consider this to be the subjective evolution. Now, this is where we are. Right now, everybody feels they're a character in a story. That literally means everybody feels they're a subject in a grander subject. For example, the idea of civilization, the idea of a cosmos, the idea of history. These are all ideas that have become very close to reality because they are there to reflect reality. So the subjective evolution was a sort of mastery over being able to observe ourselves as a thought. Now, this is where I feel we're going, and this is really kind of sets the context of what I mean by a power beyond stories. We evolved into a subject. Isn't it weird, guys? Evolution, the object evolved into a subject to itself. Isn't that weird? Isn't that like unevolution like? You know? Or maybe it's an evolution beyond we can fathom. I mean, there could be forces beyond our measurement. But anyways, I'm saying that we are right now subjects that feel we have the free will to administer the object, not realizing we are simply a beam of attention, attributeless attention. This is honesty. This is honesty with your own presence. When you realize what you're observing and how the observer is to some degree distinct from what is being observed. That means right now you're hearing me. How do you know my voice isn't your voice? The same distinction is going to be there when you get acquainted with your inner realms. I consider an advanced communicator someone who's aware of the inner realms and the outer realms. Someone who's aware of the inner realms can't get touched by language. That means on some level they know that the value of their eyes. They know that their DNA gives them access to a certain site and the DNA of others gives them access to a certain site. So it's not a battle of which perceiver, which antenna gets the signal, who got the signal accurately. It's as if what is the point of all this reception and expression that's going on. So I'm saying a power beyond stories means a moment during a phase of a civilization into becoming an advanced civilization, where in this phase the creature begins to become a complete, still, static observer of the movement that gives it a story. So if you feel, excuse me, if you feel like self in a world, this is a constitution. This is something that's just, it's literally you're being a sculpture in the moment. Now this sculpture can change, and it depends on your relationship with identity, your relationship with imagery. I'm that person saying in history, after idol worship, after we were like, yo, is this object truth? And then we were, somebody slapped that object out of our hands and we're like, yeah, we're like, stop worshiping idols. And guess what? What do you think we went on after? Do you think worshiping stopped after idol worship? No. We started worshiping language. And then when we went through a phase in our history where language became more important than reality, language began defining reality. So we, till currently right now, till 2020, don't freak out folks, we're still language worshippers. We haven't wandered beyond the language. I mean, certain groups of human beings have, but now I think we have to bring the game into a collective, into a global community. For me, it's like there's a couple of chess moves that our civilization needs to make, and these chess moves would instantly increase its chance, reduce its chances of failure. It's like we don't know what the success looks like, but we can see the failure at least, and we can reduce the percentage of the failure. Right? So it's kind of like you can't see the other dimensions, but you can reduce the filters that are limiting you from seeing the phenomena as it is to some degree. So this subjective evolution means that human beings are realizing or getting acquainted with how they are mind fields. Don't be alarmed. You might be an early riser. You might be one of those human beings that have realized the mind is a field. Don't freak out. At most what happens is you come to this preferenceless witness, and as that preferenceless witness, most people think they have to be that emptiness their whole life. You know? They feel they have to be the empty air in the balloon of divinity. You know, but I'm telling you, the whole point of emptiness is just refreshing the browser of life. You are a creature of design. You have an evolutionary opportunity. You are also clothing yourself in thought and ideology. So Mr. Within is just saying, wonder about how your mind is dressed up in language. And then you automatically, as you realize you're not a creature of thought, your own nature opens up the world for you. I remember in one of my poems, I wrote something so intense that years later I read it and I was like, whoa. Like, and it was like this thing where I said it was like everyone's in a private lesson with God, right? I had this sort of notion in one of my poetic writings. I write a lot of mystical hymns. For me, that God is not a concept. So I'm trying to wonder, if it wasn't a concept, what would the actual experience of reality be? And really what it is any dimension beyond time doesn't have a problem with speed. And most of human life is oriented with speed. So if our evolution is to a timeless destination, an inconceivable destination, but we're suffering with the speed our lives are going or where it's going, then it becomes a sort of ultimate need for the civilization to be like, hold on a minute, and then the civilization resets. I feel that that's one option. The other option is we just start living or behaving, at least we are in an advanced civilization, until our grandkids are like, yo, why were our ancestors behaving that way? And then they realize that in our eyes we have lived in better ways, and we can share these ways with them. So power beyond stories would be an experiential level. It would literally mean that right now you feel you're a body, known body, but you have an unknown mind. There will come a time where you will feel like a known mind, and you're going to think the body is unknown. You're going to, trust me, space is just the other side of the coin. So where would we be led? Now we come to the fourth phase of evolution. This fourth phase of evolution is literally why I'm constantly talking about Civilization 2.0 and the advanced communicators. Because, check it out, first it was an unconscious world, then there came an unconscious self, the physical separation of limbs and design of creaturehood, and then there came this creature becoming aware of itself as an individual, and that was the subjective evolution. So that's self being conscious, so world unconscious, unconscious self, then we came to the conscious self. Now we are going to the conscious world, okay? And this is the fascinating part. We are literally those beings in history that are the early ones noticing that we are beyond the language that we have defined ourselves for so long. You were never a thought. When you realize that, you'll laugh and cry at the same time. So a power beyond stories means an attempt to wonder about how language is being reality. When you look at guilt, like why is it that like even Sam Harris, he was giving this talk about free will being an illusion, and he literally says to the audience, like, it's like there's this voice inside your head that says things. Then he pauses and says, haven't you noticed? And everybody laughs, like it was a cool pause, you know? But then Sam Harris says, it's like you could be listening to me and then suddenly be like, you know, suddenly it's the multi-presence of attention. And I think this multi-presence of attention has a multidimensionality, which is a sort of three-dimensional depth. What does that mean? That means I can see the dimensions of an object. But in my experience, when I've wondered what are the dimensions that a subject is kept in, usually the subject is evocational in accordance to how this shapeless effort becomes you, becomes your action. So what does that mean? That means we have access to it's like your mind is a nightclub and you know the owner. You know, you have access to the inside of the club. Do you know? So you have an access to inside the workings of your mind, but they either they express through the language of what you are consciously familiar with. So for me, like I'm a person that I feel we are evolving into an ocean. I feel literally evolution is like you emerge as a drop. It's like I saw the cycle of the soul when I saw how a drop it falls from, in some sense, the clouds, this individual lost soul. And this individual lost soul lands on an earth, lands on a leaf. Then it drops. After it experiences its journey on the leaf, it drops into a river. And after it experiences its journey through the river, it in some sense experiences the ocean. And so little is this said, but we're not here to just live in the earth. We are here to build the earth. We're set here for work. And people may disagree, but I'm telling you, the future generations are waiting for the eyes of all those listening. That means there was something that there was one day I felt guilt. There was one day I felt I had let down my family. You know, I had let down everybody. I'd even let down myself. And it was a moment where I'm like, oh, my family, I've let them down. Oh, you know, my friends, I've let them down. Oh, myself, I've let myself down. Oh. And then it was like, oh, the future generations. And that's where it struck a chord with me. That was the only thing in my psychology where everything else was okay to fail, except the eyes of the children's, like my grandchildren that I would never see. It was like the only something about the future. It was as if, I'm telling you, in 2015 I had an experience where I literally felt I was done in this world. I felt it was done. I felt literally I had lived this lifetime. And I remember in my inner realms, I found this moment where literally I was just, my body was still. I was standing, my body was still, but behind my eyes, I had gone to this mountain, inside this cave, and there was a door. And my hand was on this door, and I had this feeling that it's done. Literally, I felt whatever conscious entity I felt I was in the moment, it was transitioning. Like, I had this feeling like if I had gone through that door, maybe I would be a totally different being. You know, maybe I'd be done with this. My eyes would be done with this lifetime and I would move on. You know? I had this mentality, but there was one thing that kept me. And it was it was just this distant glare of the future. And that's the thing that separates us. We remember. That is where our hope comes from. That's where our abilities come from. And that's what potential really is. You remember, and that remembrance shows you what has been done. And then your mind is there to project the new. And of course, you're a pilot. You can pilot into your lesser dimensions, your lesser realms, or you can pilot into your higher realms. In efficiency and inefficiency, remember, you are free to choose, but you're not free in some sense to choose what the options are, because that the world is giving you that. So when my eyes open throughout the day, I kind of, you know how people wake up and they stretch, you know? So similarly, it's like the same where my free will stretches. And my free will stretches, and after certain lapse of certain folly, after certain journeys around the sun, it suddenly dawned on me that I'm just energy. And it was hilarious. It was a moment where it was like, how could energy die? How could what is existing not exist? And I realized it is the experiencer that feels it has lost. That means if you think about it on an atomic level, it's literally like it's a hallucination of forms. Like literally, you look at you're like, is free will an illusion, or is human biological existence an illusion? And you're like, technically, if I see that I am all these tiny cells, then the humanhood is an illusion, is an hallucination to cellhood. Do you see? There's a quote from Rabindranath Tagore, which I think literally he kind of explains why the human being is kind of designed. In my way, I don't know, I see that through his quote. Maybe others don't, but he says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. There's three parts of the quote. I'm going to explain all to you. He says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. Literally, like you can imagine the child being born, and it's like, I just want to have fun. You know, the child just running. He had a dream of joy. He thought life was just joy. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. And then he says, I awoke and I saw that life was service. That means he went after his desires for joy. And he reached the desires of his joy, and he got everything he wanted for himself. But then he realized, after you have lived for your inner realms, only your outer realms remain. And that's when the omniscience realizes why man is here. And then he says, I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I I slept and I awoke and I saw life was purpose. I acted, and behold, service was joy. That means there is a level of joy the human being experiences only in their inner realms when you are really hedonistic and you just are cruel and you just take your own desire into consideration. But then there is a joy in serving something that is not some divine agency. It's your poor species that is on a rock in the middle of nowhere and has one chance to become an advanced civilization. After some point, it's like, it's like I see these motivational videos on YouTube, and I'm like, what kind of motivation is this? It's just people doing barbells, I mean, that's essential, especially in a civilization where we need to take care of the body, the health of the civilization. I mean, sure, that's wonderful, but in regards to the emergence of a new ethos, that means imagine civilization suddenly collapsing and rising. Now imagine civilization is collapsing and rising. The rise and fall of civilizations being so nanosecond like that every second there is an update. That means imagine in a world that endlessly is becoming efficient. As if we suddenly realize, wait a minute, 8 billion creatures on a sphere in a vacuum, on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and we're fighting over what? On every person's eyes assumption of what value is. After some point, we'll step out of these inner realm spheres that we're in, and we'll peek our head outside of our belief systems. Because there's literally two things that really can happen in reality. Okay? Either the self is pulled by the world, or the world is pulled by the self. This is where the testament to the strength of character comes in. How much you can remain yourself when the world changes, and how much you can still see the efficient world regardless of the inefficiency of the self. After some point, there is no instruction. It's a living thing. It's like I'm giving this talk on a giant turtle's back, and which all civilization is built on, and we just haven't realized that it's alive. The world is alive, so be kind to the eyes that are open. Be kind to everything that through this meaninglessness has arisen, including that car. I don't know if people can hear. Who knew? Outside my window there's a NASCAR race, guys. Who knew? What I noticed is that dynamism is the freedom of the individual. That means all suffering, if it's based on an individual image, you're either going too slow or you're going too fast. That's modern suffering. Most people, if it's just an adjustment of speed. And then there's another category of suffering where it's those people who they don't have a problem with speed, they have a problem with direction. And those people who have a problem with direction literally have that problem because something in the outer realms rejected the validity of their inner realms. And this can happen. Okay? This can happen that there's some people, you go and see it. You see, this is why I'm saying man does have an example. I've seen a collective being. And I'm not going to say it's us in oneness. I'm going to tell you that one idea being believed by a group of people is literally how that idea is existing through all those bodies. That belief systems are collective beings. They're literally like, imagine an alien came to invade Earth, and suddenly on every person's head there was this weird pod. Okay, somebody made a movie or something like this, right? There was this weird pod, so everybody was suddenly speaking the same. Believing the same. Everybody thought they had to see the same thing all the time. How ridiculous. How can an evolving creature see the same thing? How can anything be normal in an entropic universe? For me, I remember I had this friend, bless him, his name, we called him Gabby, He was a friend of the family, and he would always talk about conspiracy. And I remember after a point I told him that it's kind of like, why are you seeing, why are you seeing uh, endless enemies behind doors? Why don't you understand that it's the world, the world, the whole world? Do you see what I mean? That means this world can be filled with endless stories, and it can be made with endless conspiracies, you know? Let me tell you why. Because language is being worshipped, and when you worship language, language possesses you. And that's reality. And every person on some level, this might sound ridiculous, but I've kind of looked at mysticism from various angles, and all those people who are worshipping secrets, do you know how rude you're being to the other realms? Do you know how rude esotericism is? Do you know how rude it is acting like a god in this dimension? It is very rude. It's very rude to the unknown. Do you know? That means I'll tell you this. Let's free everybody from their ideological suffering. You know how? Everything you think you know, every person alive on this rock, just like how space holds matter, the unknown holds knowledge. And so, in some sense, I salute every human being who has explored and advanced man's knowledges, but I cannot salute the educational system, for it is missing out on its opportunity. There is no secret here. There are just eyes that are passing through. And you can smile as through space before being a creature of matter, or you could frown as matter before you understand the space of it. I am telling you, there is nothing behind the veil. It's kind of like that concept they would say, G-I-G-O, gigo. And what would that mean? I don't know what it would stand for. I don't know if I'm even saying it right, but the idea was what you input is your output. And so many people run with their fancy stories to the unknown, not realizing it's unknown. The unknown won't acknowledge you until you realize it's unknown. That means all these people looking for, let me tell you what it is. It's the backlash of the ignorance of the duality. There's a language of duality, and you speak this, chaos and order, realize your work is superior to karma. That means, uh, that means, as Rumi says, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a place. I'll meet you there. And then he says, when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. It's all about potential. All those I kind of strangely feel there is a ritualistic component that on some level 8 billion human beings, the way they're living is generating a field where the future generations are coming out. That means when I realize, oh my God, like when in all the places I've walked in public, how many people I have never like even seen their eyes. How many of their memories was I just a backstory picture? Do you know what I mean? It was fascinating for me how many people it was. I was thinking like, what was the purpose of my life? And I realized like just being part of the landscape. We all have a purpose like that that's being fulfilled, you know? You know, it's like, what was your life purpose? I don't know, man. I was just part of a civilization. You know, I don't even know what I did there. And God is like, word, word. And then universes are born accidentally. I'm being playful, of course, but I'm saying that really we have to prepare for a civilization that is not afraid of confronting its true experiential nature beyond its existential limitations of how the sensory perception should endlessly be the same pattern. It doesn't need to be. Our eyes are open. What does that mean? That means we're here to see the world change, not ourselves. And what if after you had received the greatest, most enlightening teachings on yourself, let me tell you, you will realize that the inner realms, their conclusion will be the outer realms. The outer realms, their conclusion will be in the inner realms, and you will stand in between realizing you're the pilot of your, uh, the way your sight dances as manifestation. We are no little thing. We are, it's like right now, people think I'm just giving a talk to people. I'm also talking to the Andromeda galaxy. I don't know if they hear it, but I'm talking to you know. It's just advancement. I see there is no, like, that's pure love for me. To see what could have been. For me it's as if there is a romance to as a sort of escapism from the harshness of life. And that romance is only fulfilled when you live for something. In another talk I said live for life and you live for life. I wasn't joking. But what does that live for life mean? That means you, instead of thinking life is an obstacle, you see it as an opportunity. It is an honorable privilege. That means I didn't open my eyes thinking, like, how can I say it? I didn't even open my eyes with a thought. My eyes were open before I had them. It's the study of the self, guys, which eventually will be seen to be codependent with the world. That means even if you think you're a self, like you got to realize it. What suffers? What are the ways that human beings suffer? Like Buddha talked about suffering, but I don't know how deeply he looked at its nature. I mean, he looked at it so deeply that he found a way out of it. But I'm telling you, my Mr. Within's way of looking at suffering is that we're boxing ourselves with language and then constantly getting surprised when nature behaves differently. After some point, it's just a walk. If you're a person who can walk in this life, you have the greatest ability. You have all that evolution needs. And when I say walk, I mean, guys, there's been moments where I've walked in a park, and there's been moments I've sat on a bench, and in my mind, I've flown into a sky. Like literally, it wasn't even. There was no walking at that point. The inner realms give you a freedom of animation, but you need a slight push. Guys, I'm going to tell you a story. This Vedic story that will literally demonstrate what I mean by this power beyond stories. There's this man. He wonders about enlightenment, and he's like, all right, let's go try to see what this is. The man realizes this is a Vedic story back in the day. He realizes there's this guru. And this guru that meditates by this kind of barn, this giant barn filled with cows. And so one day this man in the morning, he's going for a walk and he suddenly sees the guru there and he finds the opportunity to ask the question and he walks up to him and he's like, hey man, what is this enlightenment you talking about? The guru closes his eyes and lets the moment speak. And as he witnesses his inner realms, he says to, in some sense, the man that uh, you who are seeking enlightenment, this is what you gotta do. You gotta take these 400 cows I have, and you gotta take them to the mountains, and when they're 1,000, you're gonna come back, and I'm gonna tell you the secret. And this guy's like, what the fuck? This guy wants me to take his cows to the mountains? And then he thinks about it, and then he says, why would this guy trust me with his cows? Maybe there's something to this. And so the guy's like, all right, let's give this a try. And he's like, okay, a stranger who has promised me truth. and and the guy takes the cows, and it's like this moment where he's in the forest, and he's like, he goes to this mountainside, the safe mountainside, and he sits on this rock or whatever every day, this spot in nature, and he sits there so long, so many days passes, and every day he would count the cows. After some point, he stops counting the cows, and he just sits there and he takes in nature, and he notices there's this silent multitasking of a world with self in nature, you know. And so he stays there so long, getting engulfed in this sort of meditative bliss of nature just occurring before we have an opinion on it, that after a while, like so many days pass, and one of the cows comes up to this guy, and he's like, yo, we're 1,000, let's go back. And the guy suddenly remembers why he was there, you know? And then he suddenly sees he's forgotten the way. He stands up, he's trusting, literally, he's been so still and silent that nature moved first. Okay, guys. The guy forgets the way back. And the nature and the wind tell him where to go. He remembers the way, the nature and the wind guide him. Suddenly he opens up to the language of nature and gravity. He eventually goes back, and all the cows, somehow, as if they all know what to do, they go back to the barn. He kind of comes down this hill like Gandalf from Lord of the Rings 2, coming to save the day, kind of like this illuminated kind of guy, you know? And he comes back, and it's the morning, and the guru's meditating in the same spot. And as all the cows strangely go back in the barn, there are 1,000, the guru stands up, and he comes to, literally his intuition kind of feels like, okay, and he looks at this guy, and he's about to kind of say it. Then he looks in his eyes, and he sees the guy already knows the truth he wants to share, as if even though it was a simple task, meaningless in one dimension, in another dimension its value was seen. That is the value of not fearing your own multidimensionality, your own study of how your attention projects the realm. And that's the thing. That's when I say you speak the language of even animals and creatures by acknowledging they are living beings. And I am telling you, karma is you not acknowledging life when it's in front of you. That is it. That is all the whole issue of karma. It's like we're on the back of this turtle, and we don't realize we're walking on its neck, and the turtle's like, yo, you don't even acknowledge me being alive here? Like the planet, if Gaia had a voice, it'd be like, yo, stop it guys, I'm here. We need a counterattack to this illusion that things have to be normal when normality doesn't exist. Back in the day, it was normal to wear top hats. Now it's not normal to wear top hats. What is this normality people speak of? It's a myth. And the only thing that is reality is our attempt towards the legend. That means that's what I say a civilization based on skill, where every day you turn on the news and you're seeing no longer competition over egoic central attention, but a competition of skill, collision of skill. Like imagine you were in a world where every person was an incredible martial art master, do you know? And every person's dialogue or communication was like the effort of that skill. So I'm thinking, wait a minute, why not build a civilization that from the beginning says, oh, child of humanity, you are the advancement. The past is just giving you all that it's got before it fades. Really. There's a character in this Japanese comic series called Shingeki no Kyojin, where this character is named Mikasa, and she says, this world is cruel, but also very beautiful. And so it's kind of realizing that the conditions, literally, yeah, life could be cruel in regards to where it has placed human beings. A bunch of creatures on a rock that their whole life go into taking care of themselves only to realize that the efforts of their mind should have been simultaneously. You know, it's like most people are living for a future which they want now, not realizing when they reach that future, they're going to want another future. So it's the study of time and how the light in your eyes is defining you. That's the cool thing about reality. That if you don't define it, you see how it defines itself. You see how it moves first. I'm telling people knowledge is not the way teachers are teaching it in school. It's an exploration. You got to think the teacher doesn't has no clue what the teacher is teaching. Then that's the wonder. You know, I said it in one talk, it was like the scholarly vision, where you realize you're on an island. Imagine you were on an island and you had to not only reinvent civilization, but you had to wonder. When you do things alone, when it's like when mastery, I think this is what mastery is. When you do something so many times that you begin to see so many angles of it that the next time you go to do that thing, you just see the landscape, inner landscape successful. Your mind begins speaking the inner cinematic language of the art form. And so after a while of, and whether it's painting, writing, or whatever, it's like the writer's hand becomes like your, how you don't think about your lungs, and you just close your eyes and an emotion comes in, and whether your eyes are open or not, you can write anything. And you tap into what I call rhythms. Rhythms, non-dual rhythms of endless information and geometrical phenomenology in it. That means after some point, I notice everything is geometry. I'm not joking. In Mr. Within's view, in reality, I think the geometrical reality has spoken more than the reality of the human personality. I feel there's much more meaningless geometry moving around than people and stories, you know? Guys, there isn't going to be a Q&A after this, so if anybody has a question, you can ask it in the chat section, and I'll take intervals of responding to it. I feel that I want to talk about something, guys. You can say this is Mr. Within's theory or view on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I see Maslow's hierarchy of needs actually two different dimensions, the oscillation between two different dimensions. So I want you to imagine like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs flipped around and connected to it. There's an endless oscillation. There's a cyclical relationship going on to psychology, which makes you feel you're a journeyer through time. But it's actually a spiral-like journey. So I would say back in the day, time was a straight arrow. That's the more archaic way of seeing it. I think the modern way can see it as a spiral. That means it has a sort of curve to it in accordance. The speed of search suggests the result. All right, let's see. Let's see, how can I bring this to a proper geometric level? All right, so I gotta get a picture first. So hang in there, guys. By the way, some people were listening to this and they're like, who's Mr. Within talking to? I'm talking to the chat section, assuming as if they were actually here. Yeah. So that's there we go. All right, I hope people can see this, okay? So this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, okay? And you can see these are dimensions that the human being, literally you as a human being, need to pay attention to these, or you kind of, these are the dimensions you need to engage as a social creature, and not just as a social creature, just that all of these are leading towards self-actualization. So what does that mean? That means the first thing you need to take care of is your physical existence. So in no way I am ever, you're going to go here in these talks, I'm telling people that you should forget the objective realm. You should, there's a spirituality, there can be enlightenment that could be misleading when it's escapism, okay? I'm not saying escapism, I'm saying we acknowledge whatever objective information we have access to, then we also wonder about the unknown that's whole everywhere, okay? So in regards to you being a human being, because this is Mr. Within talk, I'll say like the way I'm saying it is that in front of your eyes, that's your objective realms. Behind your eyes, your subjective realms. If I was to interpret my own idea through Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the more you go up this hierarchy of needs, the more you are returning. You're being a mind moving a body. The more you're on the bottom of this chain, on this of this pyramid, Maslow's pyramid, hierarchy. The more you're on the bottom, the more your outer realms are real for you. Okay, so I'm going to explain that to you right now in this picture. So let's say you're a human being, you're a child that's born. To make this global, you're part of the human species. You have a unique DNA. That means your vision is a unique denomination of what the what the sight of the species is. And so, just a second, folks. So you're a human being. You're born. Okay, you got to take care of your physical existence, literally. Okay, if you can't take care of your physical existence, you discontinue. You know. So physics. This is the objective realm. So first, you got to master a sort of handling of the outer realms. Okay. So first, you on some dimension, you're like, all right. Here it gives you an example: breathing, food, water, sex, sleep. What does it say there? Homeostasis, excretion. These are basic physical needs. These are basic kind of in the subconscious. You got to kind of handle. You got to get master yourself. So then we go on to safety because we're living in a society and the evolution of the hunter-gatherer tribe-like pattern. So it's something where after you've taken care of your physical existence, your physical self, then you're moving to the space. So first you like your headquarters is your physical body. Then the next stage to, let's say, handle is your space, the space you have. So then it comes to security of body, of employment, of resource, of morality, of the family, of health, of property. So after you're physically able, now this able being goes and builds safety for itself. It creates a sort of placement. Then it becomes more and more, if you look at it, more subjective. After you've got you're physically healthy and you've got your physical survivals maintained, then you go and it's like you're kind of, you build your life, and then you go and you build, for example, a family. The sense of belonging, here it says friendship. What does it say? Family, sexual intimacy, right? So before, the physical needs are just satisfying the animal urges in your own masterful way, and then you're now beginning to take steps as a psychological being, and psychology needs to administer space and define space for itself to acknowledge its own independence, the psychology of the person. So that's the safety. So after the safety, after you've kind of have your own headquarters, then you kind of in a space that you trust, you build relationships with other minds, and that trust either blooms into love, or it's love from the beginning, or it was never love. And then so that's the next dimension. You move on to, in some sense, love and belonging. Then it's esteem. Check this out. After you have your whole, let's say, family and friends and all this going, you have next your sense of self. You're like, what about me though? So you handled what was in front of your eyes to such a point. Now you're handling what's behind your eyes. Your all your friends, family, and those around you are contributors to how you are a person, right? So then it says self-esteem, confidence, achievement, respect of others, respect by others. Okay, that's really okay. Let's say modern world defines esteem that way, but so you see, it all goes eventually to self-actualization after you've got, let's say, a fame or whatever a status. Then you're like, okay, now I want to experience the real self. You know, they're like, what do you mean the real self? I mean the real self, not just the real self, the real. It just never ends. It's so real. You can't even fathom how real it is. So then self-actualization, more it says here, if I can read properly, morality, creativity, spontaneity, problem solving, lack of prejudice, acceptance of facts. Yeah, but that self-actualization is literally that because you have unique DNA, you are responding to the world in a unique way, and it's only up to how you perceive yourself in regards to how you fit into reality. You know, if for example in Japan they say the man is the room he enters in. My own personal grandfather, he was this business guy, this factory owner in Iran, and he when he would come home, he would take off his hat and he would just go home and he would say, when you go home, you're no longer a businessman, you're a family man. So it was as if the psychology was in accordance to the rooms one entered in, right? So these are kind of like a layer building upon layer as there's a victory in all these battles towards the top, you know. So guys, in the chat section, somebody's asked a question. Gaffa says host. I think he means me. Do you believe in God? By host, do you mean God? Are you talking to God right now? Do I believe in God? Well, I'll tell you this. I feel I don't believe language can contain truth. I think the truth is directly experiential. I think words are shadows of truth. So I don't believe in a conceptual God, but if you ask me if there's a direct experience of a reality where it's like a field moving everything, then I would say that is accessible experientially, but it goes beyond the language threshold. So it's like everybody's defining it. I'm the one saying the unknown is the unknown. That's the whole point of it. That means I am not here trying to uh, touch the inconceivable. I am here to wonder why the inconceivable is here at all. You know. So, guys, me showing you this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I was saying it after you reach in the top of the self-actualization, then you start caring for no longer the individual. You start caring for the physical needs of your collective, of your civilization. Then you care about the safety of your civilization. Then you care about the longing and belonging of the civilization. Then you care about the steam of your civilization. Then you care about the actualization of your civilization. This is why I said there were Maslow's pyramid is like triangle is like hierarchy is like two triangles. There will be all any person who's ever seen a normal triangle. Trust me, there's been two inverted triangles right there, but you haven't noticed it. You know, the inverted triangles are the galactic archetypes. I feel when I say galactic, I mean the evolution of global to universal identity. We can say Diogenes, this Greek philosopher, he was so ahead of his time that he was literally living in a way where all the New Age people are now trying to live. They asked him, Diogenes, where are you? Like, where are you from? And Diogenes said, "I am a citizen of the cosmopolites," and that's the backstory. That's the context that we want the future generations to have if they want freedom. So I would tell you that uh, trusting the moment. It's like here's the thing: if you see the concept of God, you don't exist. That's the issue. It's all God from the beginning. That's the issue. So it's not that you can deny everything being one being. We could totally think a bunch of galaxies are being one being, you know. But I'm saying that the whole point of God was that it was inconceivable to man, Gaffa. So that's why it was an attitude there. If you look at it, religion is a strange, strict Stoic approach. When I say Stoic, that means the behavior dictates the virtue, not the linearity or the rationality of the ideas. It's as if like it's a sort of pathway and algorithm for the bewildered soul. Sorry, not the bewildered soul, the bewildered beast. The animal that chose to wear a suit and a tie and kind of build giant metal planes. I mean, that's definitely not animal behavior, you know? I mean, technically, we can't really call ourselves animals because which animal does what we've done? So we're animal plus unknown. That unknown is the mind, and Mr. Within is saying, why are people just reducing reality only to materialism when there's so when it's like if I ask you right now, visualize like you're gonna see the inner realms have a they are visible but they are not tangible. I can imagine like a blue cube just hovering in the air, slowly spinning, but I can't pick up that blue cube. It's as if in my inner realms they're in their own position. So these are all things that we have to wonder about it as a species or a global community or as a group of writers or whatever, try to somehow share with the world that we are way more than we think we are. That thoughts never existed when experience was here first. That means, like I said, I mean, this is a kind of repeat, but like I have retained memories of my a memory before I learned language, where I was not a concept, so I couldn't suffer as a concept. Somebody once said, this guy named Swami Krishnananda, he said religion is God remembering himself, and I was like, oh my God, like that's really the inconceivable moving conception. That's the like Carl Jung being like, you got to make the unconscious conscious, then realizing, oh my God, the unconscious is from a consciousness of a higher dimension. No, Gaffa, that's a great question. I mean, you're just asking me if I believe in God. I mean, that question is really it has nothing to do with linearity. It's just you're asking me what I see. But anyways, guys, I guess I'll try to. I don't know. Unless people want me to talk about something more, I think I can bring the talk to an end. You know, guys, I'm going to go into a story quote tunnel. I'm going to just see what people have said about stories in the past. Guys, I think I might be having some allergic issue. Maybe, potentially. But here, I'm just going to read a bunch of quotes with what people think of the word stories and story. Zig Ziglar. I believe that being successful means having a balance of success stories across the many areas of your life. You can't truly be considered successful in your business life if your home life is in shambles. Maria Montessori. Travel stories teach geography. Insect stories lead the child into natural science, and so on. The teacher, in short, can use reading to introduce her pupils to the most varied subjects, and the moment they have been thus started, they can go on to any limit, guided by the single passion for reading. Okay, Oprah Winfrey. The challenge of life I have found is to build a resume that doesn't simply tell a story about what you want to be, but it's a story about who you want to be. J.K. Rowling says the first story I finished was when I was 6 years old. Okay, 6 years old writing stories? That is badass. George, George Eliot says, no story is the same to us after a lapse of time. Or rather, we who read it are no longer the same interpreters. Spike Lee. All directors are storytellers, so the motivation was to tell the story I wanted to tell. That's what I love. Stephen Curry. I believe he's a notable basketball player. Sometimes people make it seem like you have to have certain prerequisites or a crazy life story in order to be successful in this world, but the truth is you really don't. I think he's onto something here because really what it is opportunity alertness. You are aware of how the environment is changing, so you're also aware of the self that is required for the job, maybe. Let's see what other quotes are there. Sorry guys, I'm just okay guys, let's continue. I'm feeling a bit nasally, so mind the interruptions. David Carson, I'm a big believer in the emotion of design and the message that's sent before somebody begins to read, before they get the rest of the information. What is the emotional response they get to the product, to the story, to the painting, whatever it is? Again, a note for the direct experience. There has to be something about Maya Angelou. Maya Angelou has some incredible quotes on writing. Check this out, guys. Maya Angelou says everyone has at least one story, and each of us is funny if we admit it. You have to admit you're the funniest person you've ever heard of. Oh, how the gods of humor laugh. Maya Angelou says our stories come from our lives and from the playwright's pen, the mind of the actor, the roles we create, the artistry of life itself, and the quest for peace. Maya Angelou says, hold those things that tell your history and protect them. During slavery, who was able to read or write or keep anything? The ability to have somebody to tell your story to is so important. It says, I was here. I may be sold tomorrow, but you know I was here. And guys, that's the thing. Many human beings have experienced incredibly messed up and fucked up events on this planet. And even in World War II, there was this tragic amount of, it was something or close to 80 million people dying to war. And it broke my heart, because how many of those 80 billion people were people that civilization and society needed? How many of those 80 billion people were suddenly vanished out of the lives of their families? And that's the tragedy of war. It is the brutality of the ignorant echoing as the meaninglessness of the lives of the feeble. It's intense, because we are left with language as the only technology to use, but it is also a source of such chaos in this world. Guys, this quote from Maya Angelou, I'm going to read for you, deserves to be in a museum of one of the greatest sentences ever written. Maya Angelou says, there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. You know what that means? That means human beings are not rationally deciding. They are deciding in what makes them feel. They are an expression into their moment. And the world has isolated itself into its own conception, not realizing the outer realms are the only domain of integration. In front of our eyes is where the work will be done. Behind our eyes is where the blueprint has been designed. Maya Angelou says, I could fall in love with a sumo... oh my god. Maya Angelou says, I could fall in love with a sumo wrestler if he told stories and made me laugh. Obviously, it would be easier if someone was African American and lived next door and went to the church, because then I wouldn't have to translate. Interesting. But anyways, guys, let's get back to the quote before. There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. That's the power beyond stories. Something in life is fascinating you to actually give it a go and see what it is. That's the greatest inspiration of life. It's unknown for everyone. And it's a process. Anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. Much blessings. And remember, if civilizations can fall, and now they are here, now is the only time they can rise. You are waiting for your future self only to say, why did you hesitate? Much blessings and all.